The Akashic Records aren't myth, they're the memory layer of reality, a living archive that logs intention, emotion, and action. If a field remembers everything, you can read the pattern and rewrite your life. If you don't, the pattern writes you. Across India, Egypt, Tibet, and early mystics, people pointed to the same library by different names. We're not here for incense or theatrics, no fluff. We're here to decode how the archive works, why access was buried, and how to open it cleanly, ethically, and repeatably. Think of consciousness as a receiver. Think of prayer, breath, and focus as the key. Think of guidance as a signal that arrives when you are ready, not when you are curious. Tonight we map the field, test the method, and walk in with respect. You will leave with a practice, not a superstition. Reader or author, that's the choice. Let's open the spine. Start anywhere on the map and you find the same trace, a world that remembers. In Sanskrit, Akasha isn't just the sky, it's the subtle substrate, the vibratory space that carries form before it hardens. Along the Nile, Ma'at lifts the feather of truth, while Thoth records the heart's weight, a picture of moral memory carved in stone. In Tibet, adepts speak of the storehouse consciousness, Alaya Vijnana, where impressions ripen into tendencies, and tendencies into lives. In the Hebrew imagination, Zikaron is living remembrance, a memory that participates in the present. Early Christian mystics reach for the Book of Life, not as a static ledger, but as an ongoing conversation between intention and outcome. Different symbols, same claim. There is a field that remembers, and you are inside it. Listen to the metaphors each tradition chose. India chose vibration because sound travels through space without being used up. Egypt chose scales and a scribe because justice requires both measure and witness. Tibet chose a storehouse because deposits become destinies unless you reconcile them. The early mystics chose a book because what matters is readable, and you are a participant, not a spectator. The costumes vary, the action rhymes. Each points to a library that isn't dead paper but living signal, a record that edits through understanding and updates through behavior. Where intention is coherent and emotion is honest, the line is scored deeper. Where attention is scattered, the ink barely takes. Strip away the mythic clothing, and you're left with behavior. The field appears to honor intensity, coherence, and repetition. A cruel thought barely entertained may pass like a light wind. A vow spoken from the core and kept across years becomes durable. A repeated act carved by feeling, the way you reach for patience or slide into contempt, etches a groove. Families inherit grooves. Places inherit grooves. Whole cultures do. The old images, feather, book, storehouse, were training you to take that seriously, not to fear a cosmic policeman, but to recognize a pedagogy. Reality remembers so that you can learn, not so that you can be trapped. Some transmissions are too candid for this platform, so we share the full method in our free newsletter, plus a limited-time ebook copy of our book when you sign up. Use the link in the description and enter your email. Don't be the one who hears the summary and misses the substance. Back to the thread. Convergence is not proof in a lab sense, and it doesn't need to be. When sailors from different coasts chart the same current with different names, you sail by the current, not the argument. The current here is a pattern of experience. People everywhere report moments when reality behaves like a memory system. A dream delivers information you couldn't have known by ordinary means. A sacred site wakes a grief you did not earn. A prayer's answer arrives as a sentence you did not invent, but recognize with your whole body. And when you test those moments against consequence, the real ones tend to ripen into wiser conduct. The false ones lead you back to yourself with a sheepish smile. Even the skeptics inside these traditions were careful. The Upanishads warned against power hunting and redirected attention to conduct. Egyptian wisdom texts hammered the same nail. Alignment matters more than show. Tibetan manuals read like navigation charts for attention, with red ink cautions against attachment and control. Early Christian mystics insisted that true insight grows love, not ego. Beneath the differences is a shared ethic. You don't read the library to harvest advantage. You read to become more real. The records do not flatter, they form. They answer what serves growth, not what feeds vanity. Why does this matter now? Because our age is drowning in data and starved of memory. We scroll, but we do not integrate. We collect facts. We do not become wiser. The notion of a living archive rebukes surface living. It says, there is a consequence to attention, a weight to intention, a continuity to your days. It also says something kind and fierce. Nothing true is ever lost. If you miss the lesson, it returns disguised as another morning. If you keep the lesson, the groove loosens, the pattern dissolves. That is not superstition. That is how a learning field would act if the universe were serious about your maturation. Notice how the convergence also humbles the ego. You aren't the first to notice pages turning. You aren't the first to confuse imagination with instruction. You aren't the first to chase a glamorous past life, while the present one is hungry for repair. The old teachers did not discourage curiosity, they disciplined it. Ask better questions. Ask with permission. Look for fruit in behavior, not fireworks in vision. The library respects posture, and posture can be trained. All of this sets up a practical tension. If the archive is real and living, how does it write? Not as a bureaucratic ledger, but as something closer to a hologram, where each point contains the whole, weighted by how you meet life. That is where we go next. The mechanics of recording, how intensity, coherence, and repetition become durable patterns, how motive shapes the line, how personal files braid with family fields and the memory of places. Understand the writing, and you can read without getting lost. Learn the grammar, and you stop being only a reader. You begin to write. Think less like a bureaucrat stamping a ledger and more like a musician tuning a room. The room is a field that holds shape. When you play a note with enough presence, the walls answer. That answering is how reality remembers. 3 variables do most of the work: intensity, coherence, and repetition. Intensity is the charge. Emotion felt honestly rather than dramatized. Coherence is alignment, thought, word, and deed not fighting each other. Repetition is practice, the groove that forms because you return. Consider how patterns outlive moments. You lash out once, rain washes it thin. You lash out every week with the same justification. The groove deepens until it runs by itself. Flip it, and the same holds. A small act of courage repeated becomes a corridor you can find in the dark. This is why old texts reached for images like straight paths and crooked ways. They were describing navigation in a memory field, trails made by return. Motive shapes the thickness of the line. Charity performed to be seen writes one thing. The same act done quietly writes another. The field is not sentimental. It records structure, not excuses. If your mouth says forgive, while your stomach knots with revenge, the entry is conflicted, and the broadcast is noisy. When mind, speech, and body agree, the signal sharpens. Humility matters because it reduces interference. The less you need from the outcome, the cleaner the trace you leave. Impressions stack at multiple scales. There is a pattern you call me. Choices, habits, blind spots, and bright edges. There is a family field. Loyalties, secrets, vows, and gifts that travel across generations like heirlooms. There is place memory, a house that feels heavy until someone opens the windows for a season. Land that calms you, because prayers were said there longer than anyone can list. And there are cultural patterns, those shared thought forms we keep feeding with attention, that influence what a society finds easy, admirable, or unthinkable. The records are not a single cabinet, They are nested libraries that braid and unbraid as people meet each other and act. Right once is the wrong metaphor. It's truer to say, write honestly, update through growth. In a hologram, each point carries the whole image. Change one area, and the picture subtly adjusts. Repentance, repair, and new behavior don't delete the past. They reweight it. The apology without change leaves the groove intact. The small, repeated act in the opposite spirit changes the geometry. The record becomes a teacher that repeats the lesson until you pass it. When you do, the entry doesn't vanish. It becomes a reference, evidence that you learned. Why do some lines feel carved in stone? Because intensity, coherence, and repetition met for too long in one direction. Trauma can do this in a single blow. So can devotion in a single vow. Most of the time it's quieter. A phrase you say when you're tired. A posture you take when you're afraid. The field is indifferent to whether the content is noble or petty. It follows the physics of attention. That isn't cruel. It's consistent. Consistency is what makes learning possible. You can watch the mechanics with your own mouth. Track one sentence you say under stress. I never get a break. No one listens. It's all on me. Each repetition lays track for the world to run the same train. Now trade it for something small and truer. I will ask for help early. I can pause before I answer. Say it even when you don't feel it. Then act once in the new direction. The corridor appears faster than you think. Not because you wished, but because you broadcast a coherent signal and walked it long enough for the field to take you seriously. Not all entries are yours to write alone. The family field will sometimes push a script into your mouth. The place will sometimes ask you to behave as a good guest. Collective patterns tug the sleeve, but agency remains. You cannot command the weather. You can choose the next breath, the next sentence, the next tiny act that writes the next line. Do it enough, and the climate changes around you, because the old pattern can no longer find a landing strip. The records are not punitive. They are pedagogical. They remember to help you remember. When you hit the same wall, it isn't because an angry clerk stamped denied on your form. It's because the groove you laid leads there by design. Change the groove. Walk a new loop often enough for the field to believe you. If you need form, ritual can help. A daily confession of truth, a gratitude ledger, a boundary you refuse to cross. If you need freedom, choose one small disobedience against your old fear every day. Either way, you're editing the line. All of this explains why access is possible. Reading is noticing the grooves, yours, your family's, a place's, and feeling which ones carry charge now. The stronger the charge, the louder the echo. With practice, you can sense the direction a pattern wants to resolve. You ask cleaner questions, and answers arrive not as fireworks, but as quiet certainties, an image, or a sentence that feels older than your mouth. Over time, you become less interested in gossip and more interested in geometry, where the line began, where it bends, and what act, done in the right spirit, done again, will bend it toward freedom. We just mapped how patterns write themselves: intensity, coherence, repetition. Now we borrow a different language, not to replace experience, but to translate it. Think of this as building a bridge from practice to model so the mind that craves clarity can walk across without declaring itself king. Physics will not certify your prayer. It can, however, offer metaphors with teeth, ways to imagine a memory-rich universe that rhyme with what seers and ordinary people keep reporting. Start with the hunch that everything seen is riding on something hidden. David Bohm called it implicate order, an enfolded wholeness that rolls out as the explicate, the world of chairs and calendars. In his picture, what we call events are unfoldings of information already braided into the deeper fabric. That's not mysticism in a robe. That's a sober way to say, the visible may be a readout, not the source. If the Akashic idea is a field that remembers, the implicate order is its basement, where relations live before they dress as moments. Now, Picture the hologram. A holographic plate holds an image in such a way that every fragment contains the whole scene, just with less resolution. Physics pushes this further with the holographic principle. The information content of a volume can be described on its boundary. In plain speech, what happens inside is encoded on a surface you might not be looking at. If reality behaves like that, then memory isn't locked in your skull. It is everywhere, with local access points tuned by how coherent you are. A thought, a vow, a wound, each writes a pattern, the way a laser writes, a hologram. Change the interference pattern, and the image you get changes, even if the plate never leaves the table. Consider conservation of information. In the old story, things vanish. In the tighter story, information isn't destroyed. It transforms, scrambled, diffused, entangled with other streams, but still present. That's an unromantic cousin to the old claim that nothing true is lost. A remorse faced, a repair made, a habit replaced. None of that deletes the past. It rewrites how the past is carried forward. The record remains, but its weight changes. That is exactly what a conservation principle would predict in a moral key. The book doesn't burn. The paragraph is footnoted, and the chapter acquires a new spine. Entanglement adds another rhyme. Two particles interact, fly apart, and yet behave as one system. Touch one, and the other answers in a way that defies the old picture of separate things dragging messages between them. We don't need to wave this around to claim everything is connected in a bumper sticker way. We need it to admit that non-local correlation is baked into the fabric. If the world allows correlation without obvious contact, then a mind aligning to a field could plausibly find information, not bound by the distances we keep on maps. Reading the records may feel like turning a page in a room you've never visited because, at some level, the room and the reader are participating in one pattern. Be careful with the observer effect. People love to shout, "Consciousness creates reality," as if a mood could move a mountain. The subtler line is saner and more useful. The act of observing selects among possibilities and changes the system you are part of. A tuned mind is a cleaner instrument. A desperate mind is a noisy one. When you approach the field, you're not commanding the universe like a sorcerer. You're entering a measurement problem with skin in the game. Your posture, humility, service, clarity reduces interference, allowing a finer signal to emerge. That's less glamorous and far more empowering. Responsibility over theatrics. None of this proves the records like a lab stamp. Proof demands control and repeatability on material terms. The field speaks in a pattern that includes you, and you are not a neutral instrument. But bridge thinking matters. It keeps the conversation honest, invites skeptics without sneering at experience, and prevents believers from outsourcing thought. Boehm's enfolding gives you a place to put unseen coherence. The holographic rhyme gives you a picture for everywhere contains the story. Conservation of information says nothing is wasted. Everything is accounted for. Entanglement says distance is not the only way things communicate. The observer caution says you shape the reading by how you show up. Try this on an ordinary day. You sit to inquire about a persistent block. You settle the body, slow the breath, align intention to learn rather than control. In that posture, you're narrowing bandwidth and reducing noise. An image arrives, a door you've walked past 100 times. You feel the tug to open it now. You do, and a conversation you've avoided begins. Later, you notice the outer world reorganize, emails you were waiting for, an apology, a coincidence at a shop that turns into help. Did you make the world from scratch? No. You lined up with a deeper order and stopped cross-signaling. The implicate unfolded a cleaner explicate because you finally stopped arguing with it. This is why we borrow physics with respect. Not to cosplay as scientists, not to argue strangers into agreement, but to train the mind that needs a model to stop getting in the way. Models are maps. Maps are for walking, not worship. The map we're sketching says, The universe behaves as if it retains information, encodes it in ways that are everywhere addressable, and responds to the quality of the inquiry you bring. Treat that as a working hypothesis and test it with your life. If your conduct gets cleaner, your relationships more honest, and your courage steadier, then the bridge is doing its job, carrying you from theory to transformation. From here, the question is no longer, is a library real? But, how do I read without fooling myself? The answer won't come from equations. It will come from posture and practice, the way you tune, the boundaries you keep, the questions you ask, and the way you integrate what you receive. That is where we turn next. The method of access, from tuning consciousness to the channels by which guidance arrives, so the signal you hear is worth writing into your days. Long before anyone sits down with a ritual, the field leaks through the seams of ordinary life. A dream arrives and teaches you a principle you didn't know you needed. A phrase lands in the shower, short, precise, older than your own vocabulary, and days later it solves a problem you hadn't named aloud. You walk a stretch of coastline and grief rises that isn't quite yours. Then you remember the shipwreck memorial 20 steps back. A first meeting feels like a second or a tenth. The conversation runs as if the page was already half written. Call it déjà vu if you like, but notice the quality. Clarity without adrenaline, a rightness that doesn't need to shout. When the records brush you, it feels less like a performance and more like a homecoming. You recognize before you explain. The field's signature has a texture you can learn. Hallucination is flashy and self-centered. Signal is quiet and serviceable. Fantasy tries to control outcomes. Guidance adjusts posture and reveals next steps. You can test this. Ask 3 questions of any download. Is it coherent with what I already know to be true when I'm most honest? Is it congruent with my values in action, not just in slogans? Does it produce consequence that ripens into better conduct and cleaner relationships? Coherence, congruence, consequence, the triple test. Guidance that passes will rarely make you feel important. It will make you feel responsible. You've met this in micro forms. The exact right book falls off a shelf into your week. A line from a song becomes the hinge of a decision. You avoid a road for no good reason and later learn why. These aren't just cute coincidences. They are how a memory field tutors attention without needing to dazzle you. The point isn't to turn your life into omen hunting. It's to realize that you're already participating in a dialogue. The receiver is on, even when you haven't named the station. Now for a larger example that gives architecture to the anecdote. In the early 20th century, an American named Edgar Cayce lay down on a couch, entered a self-induced trance, and delivered tens of thousands of readings, health prescriptions, life patterns, practical advice, while a stenographer recorded every word. After the trance, he often remembered nothing. The archive is large: case numbers, transcripts, outcomes. Cayce said he consulted the records and spoke as if reading a file. Whether you take every claim at face value is not the point here. The point is protocol and posture, because both look exactly like what a clean field interaction would require. His protocol was disarmingly simple: physical relaxation, breath regulation, a prayer of alignment, a clear, ethical question, often framed on behalf of service to the person asking, and then an answer that began with context before it offered specifics. He avoided spectacle. He emphasized character, diet, rest, forgiveness, daily choices as the groundwork for any healing. When people asked fortune teller questions, the quality of the reading suffered. When people asked how to become more useful, more honest, more loving, the signal sharpened. He repeatedly insisted that the purpose of knowledge was to live more in tune with the highest ideal a person could name, not to win arguments or impress friends. Critics fairly point out inconsistencies and failures. Good. Fold those into your understanding. A field that includes a human instrument will be colored by that instrument's limits. Cayce was a man in a time and culture with biases and blind spots. Yet the pattern remains instructive. When devotion outweighed curiosity, when service framed the request, when a life was being put to rights through actionable changes, the guidance tended to be specific, testable, and effective. When ego or entertainment walked in the room, the pages blurred. That is exactly how an ethically intelligent archive would behave if its purpose was growth rather than gossip. Bring this closer. You don't need to adopt Casey's method or agree with every reading to learn what matters. Preparation, permission, posture, precision. Preparation tunes the body and steadies the mind. Permission clarifies what is yours to ask, when, and on whose behalf. Posture, humility, service, willingness to act, reduces noise. Precision frames the question so the answer can land in your day and be verified. The records do not reward vagueness. Tell me everything is a poor ask. Show me one belief that is bending my choices today, and the first honest act that edits it is a page that can be read and then lived. Another lesson from spontaneous access. Timing is a teacher. Have you noticed that the clearest moments often arrive after you stop pushing? You go for a walk, wash dishes, watch the sky do nothing in particular, and a sentence appears that ends a month of forcing. That's not laziness, that's bandwidth. When the mind releases its grip, the channel widens. You can simulate this deliberately. Slow breath, soften the eyes, unclench the jaw, ask once, then listen without straining. The answer may come as a picture, a felt sense, a single verb, or a knowing that refuses to be put into words, but refuses to let you lie. Write it down, then test it in motion. The field respects integration more than inspiration. Finally, remember that the records aren't a vending machine for novelties. If what you receive doesn't make you kinder, clearer, and more courageous in the unphotogenic parts of your life, you're probably listening to appetite dressed as angel. The clean signal has a traceable effect. You apologize sooner, you negotiate boundaries without poison, you pick the uncomfortable truth over the glamorous story. Your days get heavier with meaning and lighter with drama. This is how you know you're not making it up. You're being made into something steadier, and the people closest to you can feel the difference. Where does that leave us? With tools you already half use and a template that honors them, we've named the texture of real guidance, offered a case that shows posture over performance, and drawn a line between coincidence chasing and a living conversation you can test. Next, we turn the dial from spontaneous to deliberate, how to tune the receiver on purpose, preparing the body, aligning intention, opening cleanly, keeping boundaries, and recognizing the 4 channels by which the page tends to turn so you can read without stealing, act without delay, and integrate without noise. You don't break into a library. You present your card, lower your voice, and read what's yours. Access is posture made practical. Begin with the body, because the body is the first instrument. Sit or lie somewhere. You will not be interrupted. Let your spine lengthen until breath has room to move without supervision. Inhale slowly, exhale slower. 3 to 6 rounds until attention stops sprinting. Release the jaw, drop the tongue from the roof of the mouth, soften the tiny muscles round the eyes. Unclench the belly. You are not performing calm, you are making bandwidth. Now align the heart, because the field answers motive more than technique. Say your highest ideal out loud in ordinary words, not as a slogan but as a promise you intend to keep. Kindness, truth, service, courage. Choose one you are willing to live. Name for whom you ask, yourself with responsibility, another with consent, a place with respect. If it isn't yours to ask, do not ask. If it is, state why you are asking now, what you are ready to change, and how you will test what you receive. Ambition sprays static. Humility narrows the beam. Open with a key that feels honest in your mouth. A simple prayer works because it sets permissions and invokes a standard. Try something like, "Let what comes serve the highest good," arrive in truth, and land where it can be lived. Close what is not mine, clear what is not clean. If those words don't fit your tongue, translate them, but keep the architecture: service, truth, consent, clarity. Then frame the question. Don't ask for everything. Ask for one page. Ask with verbs, not fog. Instead of, tell me my purpose, try, show me the next faithful action that aligns me with my purpose today. Instead of, will this work out, try, what belief is bending this choice, and what is the first clean correction? When the room is quiet, listen in 4 ways. Some will see images: a doorway, a river, a specific room, a page with a single word. Some will hear a phrase or sentence, short, spare, authoritative without being loud. Some will feel the answer in the body, a loosening in the chest when the line is right, a weight when you drift from truth, warmth when you hit the seam. Some will simply know, the way you recognize a face you haven't seen in years. Sight, sound, sensation, knowing, none is superior. Learn your channel and stop envying someone else's. Write as you receive. Time-stamped notes keep imagination honest. Mark what arrived as image, what as phrase, what as felt sense, what as clear knowing. If interpretation jumps in, label it my inference, so you can test it later against consequence. Close the session as deliberately as you opened it. Thank the source. Revoke permissions you granted for the window, and return attention to the room, fingers, toes, shoulders, the ordinary mercy of a glass of water. Then move one small piece into life within 24 to 72 hours. Guidance that does not turn into practice curdles into fantasy. The field respects integration more than inspiration. Some boundaries are non-negotiable. Do not read without consent. Curiosity is not consent. A parent cannot demand access to an adult child's pages. A lover cannot rifle a lover's file. If you are asked to read for someone, frame the request around what serves their growth, not your satisfaction. If you are not sure you have permission, you don't. Ask the field to show what is yours to see, and no more. When in doubt, work only on your side of the pattern, the belief, the habit, the fear you can actually change. The archive is generous, but it is not gossip. Common errors arrive dressed as good intentions. Leading questions drag answers toward what you wanted and away from what is true. Prediction addiction treats the field like a weather app and you like a spectator, when the point is participation and practice. Projection dresses your preference in mystical clothing and calls it destiny. Spiritual dependency turns access into a substitute for courage, asking the library to make choices you are meant to make. Correct each by returning to basics. Smaller, cleaner questions. Service over control. Verification in behavior rather than mood. And the courage to act without certainty when the next step is clear. You will also meet symbols you don't understand. Resist decoding everything on the spot. Ask, what does this represent for me now? And accept a single thread. The field often teaches in personal idiom. The same river that means grief to you might mean transition to your sister. Over time, you build a private lexicon, and your notes become a map of how the library talks when it wants you to move. Track outcomes. If an instruction appears and you act, watch whether the world bends with you. Unexpected openings, old frictions loosening, conversations arriving at the right hour. If nothing shifts, despite honest application, ask again with a simpler question, or check whether you asked outside your permission. There will be days nothing comes. That is not failure. Sometimes the cleanest answer is wait, rest, or not yet. Timing belongs to the intelligence of the field as much as content does. You can't force a harvest from ground that needs rain. Trust that refusal protects, the way a locked door protects a house, not ready for guests. Meanwhile, keep tending to character, because character is bandwidth. Sleep, do honest work, eat in a way that doesn't fog the lens. Choose conversations that don't poison the well. These are not lifestyle tips. They are part of the radio you are building. If you need a cadence, keep it simple. Prepare the body, align the heart, open with a key, ask one clean question, receive in your channel, write immediately, close intentionally, act soon, reflect later. Repeat often enough that the act becomes ordinary. Ordinary is the point. You are not trying to stage a miracle. You are trying to live in a way that lets a deeper order be heard. Do this for a month and 2 quiet revolutions appear. You stop mistaking appetite for instruction, and you stop outsourcing choices to other people's certainty. From here, we turn to the guardrails that keep power clean. Guidance is not gossip. Permission matters. Timing matters. Motive matters. The field will teach you with static, with silence, and with symbols you cannot abuse. Learn those protections and you will stay safe, useful, and clear as you walk deeper into a library that wants you to grow, not to win. The cleanest principle in this whole territory is simple enough to write on a matchbox. Guidance is not gossip. You do not rifle through drawers because you've learned there is a library. You ask for what is yours when it is time, for the sake of growth. Consent is not a polite add-on. It is the operating system. Without it, the line fills with noise. With it, the signal finds you. Start with ownership. What is yours to read? Your patterns, your vows, your next honest act. In relationships, your side of the knot, the belief that keeps you repeating yourself, the fear that bends your speech, the boundary you resent but refuse to name. The moment you try to read someone else without permission, the field protects them and exposes you. Protection can look like silence. It can also look like static, images that titillate the ego, sweet phrases that flatter your sense of specialness, predictions that keep you inert while you wait for heaven to do your work. The archive is intelligent enough to teach by refusing you. Timing has a soul. Curiosity is not timing. You can be technically capable of access and still be denied because capacity isn't there yet. The records answer when your hands can carry the answer without using it against yourself or someone else. You've likely felt this already. You press for a reveal, but the door stays closed. Weeks later, after an apology you didn't want to make or a habit you finally retired, the same question opens easily and lands in your stomach like warm bread. The delay wasn't punishment, it was mercy. Readiness is a key, as real as any prayer. Motive bleeds into everything. If you approach to secure an advantage, to armor a fragile identity, to look impressive, the page curls. If you come to become, the ink dries fast. This is why fortune-telling corrodes the channel. Treat the field like a weather app, and your life becomes a spectator sport. Treat it like a teacher, and you get homework. Specific, humbling, useful. The future is not a fixed scenery to be toured in advance. It is a set of tendencies waiting to be edited by conduct. Ask for the lesson that lets you participate, not the spoiler that lets you avoid participating. Projection is the old confidence trick. You prefer an outcome, so you dress it in mystical clothing and call it destiny. The cure is posture and test. Ask the question in a way that cannot be twisted toward your desire. Show me the belief that would make me misread this, or tell me what I don't want to hear that would make this choice cleaner. Then test against consequence. Does the instruction make you kinder and more courageous in the unphotogenic parts of your week? Do the people who know you best notice you becoming simpler and truer? If yes, keep walking. If not, you caught your own reflection in a shiny surface and called it a sign. Spiritual dependency is a quieter trap. Instead of acting on what you already know to be true, you keep asking for permission slips from the unseen. The field will indulge you for a while, then it will go quiet. Why? Because the whole point is to put you back in your life with a backbone. Use access to clarify the next faithful step. Refuse to use it to outsource your responsibility to choose. Without this, reading becomes another way to avoid risk, and avoidance is the opposite of growth. Permissions matter in community. too. Reading on behalf of another requires their consent and their participation. If they ask with them. Frame the question together. Set the standard, highest good, truth, usefulness, and commit to testing what comes in life rather than in mood. If they don't ask, hold your fire. Intercession is real, but it is not spying. You can always work on the pattern between you. Clean up your side. Bless without agenda. Keep boundaries that protect dignity on both ends. Often that is all that was ever yours to do. Watch how the field self-protects when you overreach. Symbols multiply beyond your grasp. Answers arrive in riddles that circle you back to basics, or nothing happens at all. Take the hint. Return to the smallest question that still supports growth. What am I pretending not to know? What act would reconcile my words and my life? What debt needs acknowledgement before this page will turn? These are keys that fit the lock because they are aimed at becoming more real, not more right. Argue less with the protections. They are kindness in a hard hat. A locked door keeps the house from being looted by your impatience. Static stops you from using a sharp tool on a tender place. Silence is what a teacher uses when the next step is practice, not information. When you treat these as guidance, not rejection, the room warms. The library reveals itself to be exactly what the ancients implied, a living order that values freedom, consent, and maturity over spectacle. Hold this form as you go deeper. Ask for what is yours, in season, for the sake of growth. Test in behavior, correct with humility, accept delay, act when shown. Do that, and the line between seeking and becoming thins until the reading and the life are the same act, the author and the reader sharing a pen. Most people come to the records asking for a headline, who was I? The cleaner question is simpler and sharper. What pattern am I repeating, and what does it want me to learn? Think of karma not as a sentence handed down by a cosmic judge, but as a curriculum designed by an intelligent field. Loops are unfinished competencies. You meet them across years and, sometimes, across lifetimes, until the skill is embodied and the line can bend. The library doesn't punish, it tutors. When the same kind of person keeps arriving in your story, when the same pressure keeps exposing the same reflex, when the same opportunity keeps spooking you into the same retreat, the field is pointing with two hands. Learn this now. This reframes past lives from glamour to geometry. You don't need a crown, a temple title, or a tragic romance to make sense of why you flinch the way you do. You need the pattern in plain view, the skill it asks for, and a workable act that teaches your nervous system another way. Sometimes the records will show a scene, a vow you made under duress, a betrayal you never reconciled, a role you clung to beyond its season. Take it as a teaching story, not as a costume. The point isn't to move into that century, it is to move differently in this one. Soul groups make the lesson social. You can feel them by the speed of recognition and the density of consequence. With some people you start mid-sentence, and the conversation is already old. With others, a tiny misstep triggers a disproportionate storm. Roles rotate. Parent then child, rival then ally, teacher then student. It isn't a soap opera for the clairvoyant. It's joint coursework. Groups carry shared competencies to mature, truth without cruelty, power without domination, devotion without collapse, freedom without abandonment. When you feel the old charge, don't reach for melodrama. Reach for the seam where a new behavior would change the shared script. The record updates fastest when more than one person chooses the upgrade. Place memory as the ground beneath your feet speaking up. Some land soothes you on the first step. Some houses make you whisper without knowing why. Old prayers congregate. Old harm does too. Battlefields store rage and grief until enough witnessing and repair dilute the stain. Temples hold quiet like a reservoir. Your job isn't to play ghost hunter. It's to behave like a good guest. Ask permission inwardly before you do work on land that isn't yours. If you receive, thank. Leave an offering that matches the place's language. Care, cleanup, A promise kept. If you sense a heaviness, don't announce it like a headline. Work on your side. Clean the pattern that resonates in you, or ask the place what service it will accept. The field does not reward drama, it rewards responsibility. So, how do loops dissolve? The sequence is steady. Witness, repair, new act, repeated until the groove loosens. Witness is honest seeing without self-story. When I feel cornered, I control. When I fear loss, I flatter. When I want love, I disappear. You can't edit what you won't name. Repair is acknowledgement plus cost. Apology without justification. Restitution where possible. A boundary that protects both sides. Releasing a vow that no longer fits your size. Repair changes the weight of the past. The paragraph gains a footnote that tells the truth. New act is the muscle. Choose the opposite. Skill in the smallest viable dose. And practice it until it becomes your reflex. If you normally silence yourself, say one clean sentence early. Alv orma sol. That's orme gay. If you normally bulldoze, ask one real question and wait for the answer. If you normally run, stay one breath longer and feel your feet. The field updates when behavior does. You'll know the loop is loosening when the trigger stops owning you, when the relationship stops requiring a predictable dance, and when places that used to swallow you now return your voice. You'll also notice less spectacle in your inner life. The more you integrate, the less you need grand visions to move. Guidance becomes quieter and more local. One sentence, one image, one certainty, and your days get honest in unphotogenic places. That is not a loss of magic. That is magic, doing what it came to do. Turn insight into character. A word about past life. Recall, treat it like a hypothesis. You must verify in behavior. If the scene you're shown makes you kinder, steadier, and more courageous now, keep it. If it flatters you into specialness, drop it. If it collapses you into shame or fatalism, question it. The archive does not humiliate you into growth. Ask the records to translate any imagery into a present tense assignment. What is the skill I am meant to practice this month? Then schedule the practice the way you would schedule physical therapy. Awkward at first, then ordinary, then no longer optional because you like who you are when you do it. Beware the vow in disguise. Many of us drag promises from other seasons into this one. I must never need anyone. I must always protect. I must pay for joy. I must keep peace at any cost. These read as virtues in the wrong light. The records will often surface such lines like old nails that keep snagging your sleeve. You don't rip them out with drama. You thank the version of you that needed them. You retire them with respect. And you choose a living principle that can flex. I receive help wisely. I protect what's true, not what's fragile. I allow joy without debt. I keep peace without burying truth. Then you prove it in tiny ways until the old vow has nowhere left to live. What about patterns that feel bigger than you? Family grooves that show up in faces and bank accounts. Illnesses that stalk generations. Stories that won't let your surname breathe. Don't carry what isn't yours alone. Work at the edges you can reach. Speak a family truth that no one has risked. Refuse the role you inherited when it violates your integrity. Bless the dead without reenacting their wounds. If someone else in the group is ready, do a small act together. Apology, restitution, a new ritual that names what was hidden and honors what was good. The field respects even tiny acts when they touch a long line. Often the heaviness lifts like weather changing. If you need a practical test for any past life or pattern insight, use the same triple you learned earlier. Coherence. Does it fit the deepest truths you know when you're clear? Congruence. Does it align with your values in action? Consequence. Does acting on it improve conduct and relationship? Add a fourth. Humility. Does it make you simpler or does it make you perform? Insights that grow, you will shrink your theater. In the end, the point of remembering is to become new, not to collect stories. You're not here to curate a museum of former names. You're here to stop outsourcing your fate to grooves that don't deserve another year of your breath. The records will gladly give you a scene, a symbol, a sentence, if, and only if, you will trade it for a different Tuesday. When you do, the loop doesn't fight. It loosens, then vanishes into a lesson you no longer need to repeat. That's the quiet miracle. The author and the reader becoming one person who can write without lying. Private clarity is where this begins. Public consequence is where it proves itself. Reading the records is not a parlor trick. It is a civic act, disguised as a private discipline. When you stop outsourcing choices to fear and fashion, the rooms you inhabit change. Meetings move differently. Families breathe. Tables get less performative and more honest. The library isn't a hoard of secrets. It's a cooperative. The more you align with it, the more commons you create. Start with leadership, because institutions magnify whatever they touch. A leader who consults the field asks for the long horizon, not the quick applause. They frame decisions as clean questions. What choice preserves integrity 5 years out? What risk grows the competence of the people, not just the comfort of the board? What hidden cost are we pretending not to count? Answers rarely arrive as manifestos. They come as a pressure in the chest when you try to cut a corner, as a sentence you can't ignore, as the sudden clarity to say, not yet, or this, but slower. In practice, it looks unglamorous. A founder declines a predatory partnership because the debt to dignity is too high. A head teacher pauses a shiny policy until the staff who will carry it are in the room where it's designed. A counselor walks the watershed before voting and hears what the map left out, the memory of a flood the minutes didn't record. When leaders treat guidance as a tutor for responsibility, organizations become steadier. Fewer fire drills, more repairs that hold, fewer slogans, more truth in budgets. Healing changes when you contend with the field. Symptoms stop being enemies and start being messages. An ethical practitioner won't chase glamour. They'll ask, what pattern is this organ speaking for? What boundary keeps failing in this relationship? What grief has nowhere to land? Treatment widens to include character, sleep you keep dodging, an apology you owe, work you must leave, food that fogs the lens, a walk that gives your nervous system back its sky. Healing becomes co-authorship. The page doesn't say, you are broken. It says, right here, and you do, with breath, with candor, with ordinary acts repeated until the groove changes. Education becomes remembering rather than stuffing. A teacher who reads the field doesn't peek at a child's private pages. They read the climate of the classroom. What ritual lets attention arrive? What story makes courage contagious? What boundary protects the quiet without shaming the loud? Consent becomes central. Students learn to ask for access, to decline when a question isn't theirs, to verify any insight in behavior, not just in a reflection journal. Portfolios fill with projects that matter to someone outside the room, a garden that feeds a neighbor, a zine that preserves local memory, a repair that makes a hallway kinder. Children who grow up in that weather don't confuse noise with knowledge. They know what learning feels like in the body. Ecology is the testbed where this stops being metaphor. Places, remember. If you act like a reader, you consult the land before you move earth. You ask, what did this valley carry before we arrived? What does this river refuse to tolerate? What repair would make this forest more itself after we pass through? Then you test with the smallest intervention and watch for consequence. Water clarity, birdsong, soil that holds rain, the way people lower their voices when they enter. Stewardship becomes dialogue rather than extraction. Listen, act, listen again. Conservation turns from sentiment into practice because the field won't let you lie about impact. Either the place softens or it doesn't. Collective hygiene keeps all of this from rotting into guru theater. Groups that work with guidance need norms that protect reality. No reading without consent. Say when you're guessing. Verify in life. Rotate roles so power doesn't coagulate. Make amends in public when you blow it. Keep a simple record of what was asked, what arrived, and what happened next. If an instruction makes you feel special, test it twice. If it makes you simpler and more useful, carry it quietly. Communities that do this become recognizable by their weather: low drama, high repair, fewer pronouncements, more service, courage without cruelty. Business can be field practice, not a loophole. Pricing that honors value without extraction writes one line. Scarcity theater writes another. Marketing that tells the truth and invites consent writes one line. Manipulation dressed as funnels writes another. You don't need to be poor to work clean. You need to stop profiting from grooves that make other people smaller. The records are merciless about this in the kindest way. They'll keep showing you the bill until you pay it with different behavior. Clearer contracts, humane timelines, products that don't depend on engineered addiction, partnerships that leave both sides more themselves. Law and policy can read too. A justice system tuned to memory asks what repair would stop the pattern, not only what punishment would sate the crowd. A housing policy tuned to place memory protects covenants that made a neighborhood alive before investment tried to domesticate it. Even markets can remember through structures that reward stewardship and penalize the quick harvest that leaves soil dull and water tired. None of this requires incense. It requires readers in public, people willing to ask better questions out loud, and then do the unglamorous work those answers demand. Notice the through line. The field is conservative about spectacle and extravagant about integrity. It gives just enough information to act, then waits to see if you'll act. When you do, it expands your mandate. When you don't, it shrinks the window until you stop pretending. That isn't punishment. It's pedagogy at scale. Private insight becomes public trust when it earns a track record, decisions that age well, care that doesn't condescend, budgets that tell the truth, rituals that produce courage, streets that are kinder to feet. The plainest radical sentence here is this: your life is not just yours. Every choice writes into a commons. Every repair lightens a family field. Every clean boundary redraws a cultural groove. If you read the records and keep the wisdom private, you've missed the point. The page wants to be lived in public, in the way you answer emails, hire apprentices, design streets, heal conflict, raise children, and leave a place better than you found it. That's what authors do. They write in a way others can live inside without losing themselves. Start small, start clean. The point isn't to become special, it's to become accurate. Choose a time you can protect from interruption. Put the phone in another room. Sit so breath can move without your help. 3 slow inhales, 3 slower exhales. Feel your feet, your seat, your ribcage widening like a book being opened. Say your highest ideal plainly: truth, kindness, courage, service, and promise to act on whatever you're shown that aligns with it. This is not theater, it is consent. Give yourself a short window. 10 minutes is plenty when the posture is honest. Open with a key that fits your mouth. Let what comes serve the highest good. Arrive in truth and land where it can be lived. Close what is not mine. Clear what is not clean. Then ask one question you can test. Show me the first faithful action that untangles this pattern today. Reveal a belief bending this choice, and the smallest correction. Keep verbs in the sentence. The field respects verbs. Listen in your channel. Image, phrase, felt sense, clear knowing, and write as you receive. Timestamp it. Mark what arrived and what you inferred. Close as deliberately as you opened. Thank, revoke permission, return to the room, drink water, then act within 72 hours. Email the apology, speak the boundary, take the walk, cancel the yes you didn't mean, schedule the appointment you've been avoiding. The records are not a content stream. They are a cooperation test. Passing looks like behavior. Integration keeps you honest. In the evening, glance back without drama. What shifted? Did the conversation that always knots loosen by one notch? Did the place that usually swallows you feel less hungry? Did your body exhale when you told the truth early? If nothing moved, reduce the scope. Ask a simpler question. Clear a practical obstacle. Sleep, food that fogs the lens, a room that needs opening. Character is bandwidth. The cleaner your days, the clearer your reads. Keep boundaries that protect reality. Do not read without consent. Do not peek because you can. Do not ask to avoid risk. Ask to become. When you're reading with another, let them frame the question. Let them own the action. If you feel tempted to collect dazzling images, trade one for a single useful sentence and do what it asks. Magic that does not turn into mercy and courage is theater, and theater is cheap. Build a cadence that is too ordinary to show off. 2 short sessions a week for a month. 1 day of silence each week where you refuse to flood attention. A morning page that captures stray guidance before it evaporates. A weekly repair if you owe one. Over time, the signal arrives faster. The questions get smaller and sharper, and the gap between reading and living narrows until they are the same act. Why was this buried? Because people who can read their own source code are harder to herd. Burn a library, and you maim a generation. Domesticate a mystic, and you teach reverence without access. Build a priesthood that owns the keys, and the crowd will learn to queue instead of to ask. You can trace the pattern. Archives torched, schools that praised obedience over inquiry, seers turned into mascots or monsters, rituals kept while meanings were stripped for parts. None of that makes the field less real. It makes the loss more visible. The memory layer did not go anywhere. We were taught to stop asking it questions. There's also a quieter reason. Power gets nervous when knowledge bypasses it. A peasant who can hear the next faithful step is less impressed by threats. A midwife who trusts the body and the land is less obedient to strangers with titles. A teacher who treats children as readers, not containers, won't keep a classroom hushed for long. And some of the burying wasn't a conspiracy. It was fatigue and fear. Ordinary people experienced the field, didn't have language for it, told a story they could hold, then watched it get domesticated into decor. What was alive became symbol. What was symbol became slogan. What was slogan became silence. You don't need permission to end the silence. You need posture and practice. The on-ramp is not exotic. Clean your room and your body so the instrument works. Speak your ideal and your consent. Open with a key that names service, truth, and clarity. Ask one small, testable question. Receive in your channel. Write, close, act, reflect. That loop will rewire you. It will also start to rewire the rooms you live in, because the person who listens and acts without theater becomes strangely reliable, and reliability is contagious. When you work this way, you turn down the inner volume and turn up the outer consequence. The dramatic dreams recede. The right sentence arrives in a queue and in a crisis. You stop outsourcing your fate to experts and start hiring them for what they're actually good at. You stop looking for omens and start looking for the next faithful verb. You become, in the old language, of good report, not because you are flawless, but because your corrections are fast, your boundaries are clean, your generosity is not codependent, and your courage does not need an audience. That is how authors behave. They write into the commons with care. We're going to keep walking this way. If you want the uncut methods we can't share here, join our free newsletter. There's a limited time ebook copy waiting when you sign up. Use the link in the description and enter your email. This is the door most people never bother to open, and it closes fast. If you feel this on a deep level, comment, "I get the code."